The Molten Metal Show with Roadie.
And on the show tonight, Neil Wilkinson from Spartan Warrior. How are you, mate?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, very good. So you guys are from Sunderland.
That's right.
Now, I believe, from what I hear from some other bands, that there's a bit of a divide. The guys from across the other side of the bridge don't associate with you guys.
Well, it's a football thing, isn't it? Like Sunderland and Newcastle. But, I mean, we've got loads of friends in Newcastle as well, and who play in Newcastle bands, you know.
So tell me a bit about Spartan Warrior. You guys slipped under the radar for me for a long time. I followed the sort of scene from the early 80s in the UK. You know, I used to import records back in the 80s and listen to them and stuff here. But, yeah, Spartan Warrior. Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, Spartan Warrior, it was a band that really had started out as a band called Deceiver. Now, Deceiver was formed by the drummer called Gordon Webster and a bass player called Tom Spencer. Now, my older brother, who also sings in Spartan Warrior, joined Deceiver. And then later on, I also joined Deceiver. And then shortly after that, we recruited another one of my friends as guitarist called John Stormont. And as the band was sort of developing, it was obvious we were moving in a different sort of musical direction. And it was definitely becoming, because it was mainly very sort of blues-based rock. But when me and John joined it especially, it was obvious it was becoming something else. So we decided to change the name, and that's when it became Spartan Warrior. And like I say, I mean, we were the guitarist at the time, John. He left after a while, and I think he left to join the Jess Cox band, another NWOBHM band, Fred with the Tigers of Pantang. And then later on Battle Axe, and that's when we recruited a guitarist from a little bit further up the coast from us called Paul Swaddle, who and that was the lineup that sort of did the first two albums, really, and it was just one of those things. As doing local gigs, we heard a local studio with Guardian Records were looking for bands for a compilation album. So we contacted the studio, went through. I think we recorded a rehearsal on just a cassette player. Went along, played the guy sort of what we recorded, and he picked two songs to go on a compilation. Now that led to a full-length EP, which was the first, a full-length album, which was the Steel and Chains album. And literally just as we were finishing that, we got an offer from Roadrunner Records. So pretty much finished the first album, then started on the second one pretty much straight away. And then it was shortly after that, I think the second album came out in '84. And because of other commitments, Dave decided to leave the band. And then it just sort of fell apart from there. And then we're all sort of involved in music in different ways sort of through the years. Me especially, I kept playing a lot. And then it was after I'd joined a band called Wasted, and I was writing for their last album. I think that was about 2007. So there's quite a big gap between sort of recording. But that didn't work out, and it was on the back of that I decided to try and reform Spartan Warrior. And then it was when I'd reformed that with I think it was 4 out of the original lineup. There was me, Dave, Gordon, and Tom. And we did a comeback album, which was released in 2010. And then we had a few more lineup changes after that, which brings us up the lineup we've got today with me and Dave, who were original members, drummer James Charlton, bass player Tim Morton, and Dan Rochester on second guitar. And after Behind Closed Eyes, the comeback album, I mean, it took us 8 years to do it after that one, but we've just done another album and signed to Pure Steel Records. So that sort of brings us up to sort of present day, really.
So, like, the lineup changes, it was pretty amicable. There was no sort of issues amongst bands, because I know, having worked with a lot of rock bands over the years, there can be personalities, and that's why things change. It was just people just moved on and did their own thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I think like the two of the guys in particular sort of just didn't feel they wanted to do it anymore. One of them said he was always going to sort of bow out music altogether when he turned 50, and that's what he did. So, and it's but me and Dave decided we wanted to keep playing. We felt we had more to do, so we just decided to keep it going, really.
So you talked about record companies and stuff. So in those early days, I know I've talked to a lot of the bands from that era. Some of them got really shafted in terms of managers would sell their tracks to a record company, and years later, like for example, I spoke to Salem from Hole a couple of years ago, and Paul was telling me that they still don't own their own tracks to this day that appear on compilation albums. And I wondered, were you guys treated like that, or were you one of the few bands that managed to be able to keep everything?
Well, no, I don't think. What happened with us is not unusual. Like I say, what happened with Salem. I mean, I found out just about a year ago that we were on a compilation album. I think there were some songs from our first album. The Guardian must have sold to Bronze Records and won a compilation with Raven and Motorhead and people like that. And that's one that I only just found out about last year, really. So everybody's always got loads of tales to tell like that, you know. It sort of just comes with the territory, really, and especially when you're the age we were. I mean, you're talking, we're just kids, really, first time round doing that, and you don't really know. You take everyone at the word, and it's not unusual to get your fingers burned.
It was really an interesting time because, you know, there was a lot of bands around, and when you look at who got through, like Iron Maiden came through, etc., they were probably just lucky that who they had managing them wasn't dodgy, if you like. You know what I mean? Like they had someone that actually looked after them, whereas a lot of the rest of you were no less talented. You just
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that some bigger bands will tell you a few stories where, in the early days, they maybe weren't sort of treated the way they should have been. I remember seeing a documentary about Queen, and they were saying that they had platinum albums and stuff, and they had no money, but the manager seemed to have plenty, and that sort of what flagged. Sort of set alarm bells ringing, really. So I think that's just the nature of the business, really. It's hopefully you get a bit older and wiser.
Do you think it's changed now with record companies? Like, you know, you've released a couple of albums in recent times. Do you think, I don't know, it's changed now? There's not so many dodgy people in there, or they're not trying to do something so dodgy. It's more sort of out in the open? I'm not sure the dodgy is the right word. It's definitely changed, in as much as that there's not record companies, at least in my experience, tend not to give an advance to make an album. The costs generally all put onto the band, and what we did for our last two, and again, I don't think this is unusual these days. We sort of did the recording ourselves. Funded it all ourselves, and then delivered the finished thing to the label, who then put it out. So things have changed a lot. But mind having said that, that's pretty much the way we did the first album as well, going into a studio and recording a couple of songs at a time when we could afford it. Second album was a bit different, in as much we were signed to a label like Roadrunner, and they paid for the recording back then, but I think it's unusual these days and you see lots of bands doing Kickstarter and crowdfunding schemes and to raise money to be able to do albums now, and I think that's just the way it is. So I always ask this question of the bands from the era. The term, the new wave of British heavy metal was attached to that era later on, if you like. Did you think you were part of a new wave of something, or you just happened to just do your own thing and evolve with it?
Well, no, I think it's definitely because in our mind we were just playing what we like to play, and for me, I was just playing heavy metal, and it was only when we released something and it was reviewed, and then people started saying, well, Spartan Warrior are a new wave of British heavy metal band. And again, I don't think that's anything that's unique to us. I think that I think even Iron Maiden went on record saying that they felt that was the case, and they didn't really know that that's what they were until somebody told them they were. But it's one of those. I mean, I'm quite pleased to be part of it and proud to be part of it, but I don't think it's the be all and end all. At the end of the day, it's metal, and you can call it what you like, really, for me.
Your new album, I've heard some of it on YouTube, and it's interesting because some of the bands from that era have kind of a similar sound to what they were playing back then, but you guys seem to have a more modern cutting edge to what you're putting out now, and I think that's great. You've kind of taken the elements of the early days and you've added some more modern sound to it, and that's really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, 35 years gone by, and things do change and stuff. And again, I know, and certainly with a lot of friends we've got in other metal bands as well that were recording back in the early 80s and stuff, we were never happy with the sound that we were getting back then. And those two albums, certainly what we didn't sound like live. I think the albums that we've done more recently, and certainly the most recent one, represents more what we're like as a live band. Even back in the 80s, that's more what we sounded like, at least to me anyway.
It's interesting you say that, and you hear a lot of bands comment on, like, even Iron Maiden comment about that on their first album. Do you think it was probably because at the time, I guess, the producers that were around didn't know how to produce metal, or what was it? Was there no one out there that kind of knew or understood the sound?
Well, I think a few things. I think it was maybe partly that. Partly, a lot of it was pretty low budget in the early days. I mean, you talk about our first album, and we were going in. I think for a day's recording at Guardian Studio, I think we were paying something like £150 a day, and we're recording and mixing 2 songs in a day. So it's basically what you were doing was you were releasing demo recordings, really. So I think partly that, and everything was done really quickly and sort of on the hoof, and gear changes. I mean, I can remember using me Marshall head, me little Boss distortion pedal for that, which was great at the time, and I know a lot of people still sort of hark back to that and like to use that sort of thing now, but I like to sort of keep up to date with things a bit more, and certainly maybe recording techniques have come on a bit. I think it's a lot easier to do a good recording on quite a low budget these days.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I think that's probably why a lot of bands from that era have re-emerged, I guess. It's just you can control your own destiny a lot more and record what you want and how you want. You're not, as you say, you're not having a record company saying, here's so much in advance and we expect this.
That's definitely the case. I know when we were talking about doing another album, one of the options was to go into a studio, but we decided not to for exactly that reason. We felt it would be better for us to have complete control of how it sounded and how it was going to, sort of what was going to turn out like. And that included how the songs were played and as well. Because sometimes you're in a studio with a producer and he'll decide that he wants something done in a certain way. And that doesn't always go down well with the band.
It's interesting you say that, because a bugbear of mine as a fan in regards to Def Leppard. I mean, I understand that Def Leppard broke internationally with Hysteria, but it was the producer, Mutt Lange, that created most of that album. And I thought, well, I preferred the Def Leppard before that, but, okay, all credit to them. The album broke big and it was an international hit, but I just wonder sometimes, you think, really? You're letting the producer tell you what you want to do?
I mean, well, that's the thing. In a way, I mean, obviously they'd gone to a company who said, well, we know what to do to sort of, so you can sell loads and loads of records, and it worked for them. But like you say, from my perspective, I know how I like things to be. And it can, I mean, working in a studio with a producer that sort of takes ownership of your songs sometimes can be a bit difficult, you know.
The new album's called How to Pay. It's been released. It's available online. You can listen to it on YouTube as well, guys. It's a really good album. So you're planning on a few more albums?
Well, yeah. I mean, we've signed a Pure Steel for a few albums, so certainly, yeah. But there's also talk of reissuing the first one as well. I don't know quite what's going on with that at the moment. It was certainly it's something we've been asked for a lot, so that might happen. But yeah, I mean, we're always looking to write and record new stuff, so it's always an ongoing thing.
I want to ask you this too. The northeast of England seemed to be a hotbed of the heavy metal in the early 80s there. Now, we were looking in from New Zealand back then, pre-internet days, and everything that was coming out of the UK was punk. Was there a lot of punk up your way, or did you guys seem to be the ones that were leading the push of the heavy metal sound, and the punk was evolving elsewhere? How was it for you in Sunderland?
Well, punk was a national thing. I mean, the way that it's always been. I've watched a few programmes about it. And the way it's always been described is people got bored with all the overblown sort of prog rock and all of that, and they were looking for something a bit more accessible that anybody could do. Now, personally, punk didn't have any influence on me at all. Before punk, I was listening to Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and UFO, and I just kept doing that right the way through punk. I've got a lot of friends who were also in punk bands who sort of went in that direction and still playing punk bands, but it wasn't for me. I just kept listening to me Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and UFO and Rush and Judas Priest and all that sort of stuff, and pretty much came out the other side of punk listening to exactly the same stuff I was listening to before it.
It's funny what you say that, you know, the description you gave early on where people said, oh, it was all to do with the reaction of the, you know, people were revolting against that prog rock sound. Really, when you look at it, the evolution was what you guys did, evolving from the progressive stuff to more what you guys did. You guys were basically taking the same sound and just making it a little bit more edgier and accessible. Punk was just completely in a different direction.
Well, yeah, it was, yeah. Although I know a lot of people, when I've spoken to, they'll say that punk had a big influence on NWOBHM, and I dare say that it did have an influence on some people that play in NWOBHM, but I don't think it had any influence on us. So we always liked sort of the rock and metal stuff, and I don't think any of us were listening to punk really. I suppose coming from where I come from, I was quite fortunate, because even while punk was going on, round about that time, sort of late 70s, early 80s, even though I was only like maybe 14, 15, 16 years old at the time, I was like sneaking into bars to watch bands like Saxon, who were called Son of a Bitch at the time. White Spirit were doing the bars, and Raven, loads of bands like that, all playing locally. So even though punk was going on, there was still a lot of metal going around as well.
Neil, so you've got this new album out. How's it been received in the UK and around the world?
It's gone down really, really well. I mean, it's always nice to hear nice things, you know, but when you do an album, you're never really sure how it's going to go down. You've especially also produced and engineered it, as well as playing on it and writing songs as well. You get quite involved in it, and you don't sort of see it the way somebody hearing it for the first time. I mean, I must have heard those songs thousands of times, and you look at it in a different way. So you never really know how it's going to go down. But so far, I mean, most of it's been really, really positive. Probably some of the best reviews we've ever had out of any albums that we've done.
Thanks for chatting, mate, and I'll get some stuff on from the new album right now.